So this evening, we wanted to provide the board and also the community with an update on the work of the Superintendent Advisory Panel. And I would like to just, and you can go to the next slide, Michael. I would like to, before I begin, just really thank each and every member of the advisory panel. So the advisory panel is composed of individuals that I did invite them to participate, many of whom are on the call this evening, or the meeting, the Zoom virtual meeting. So I want to thank all of our building principals. And we do have a designee for one of our middle schools. One of our assistant principals is serving. Every single one of our school nurses is serving on the panel. They bring so much expertise and know, what it would look like when we're operationalizing many of our plans. So I want to thank all of them. Every building has an OPTA building representative, and these are elected members who represent their members of OPTA in their school buildings, with the exception of one building. Just due to schedules, we did not um, find a building rep for one of our buildings, but we do have a teacher who has agreed to serve on the panel, kind of in that capacity. Our leadership of both OPTAA as well as OPESP, which are also two of our associations, are represented on the panel. I thought we had a total of 16 parents. I would say that on total, we have 30 parents, and 16 of which are either parents who are parent leaders, or parents who have a medical background. And we do have a few parents who represent certain student populations. But, like I said, we have in total 30 parents represented on the panel. We have community leaders. I really want to thank the community leaders such as Lisa DeVivo, who I believe is on the call this evening, Dr. Morris Orenson, who is on the panel. I don't believe he's here. And all of our childcare partners who are working with the district currently. All three of them are serving, have representatives serving on this panel, and a whole host of central office administrators, many of whom are also on the meeting this evening, and our two board liaisons who are serving, both President Kisa Broy and board member Cherie Moore. I definitely want to thank each of you for serving on the panel. So if you can go to the next slide, Michael. Just as a reminder, I totally forgot to also thank Sylvia Flowers, who is serving as the facilitator for all of our meetings. And Sylvia is one of our panelists this evening who can step in and correct me if there's anything that I failed to mention. So thank you so much, Sylvia, for all of your hard work with facilitating our meetings. In total, I think we have close to 70 individuals who, again, completely on a volunteer basis, are spending their time and bringing their expertise to help us with the following objectives, which have been outlined to the community and the board previously with prior communication. And you would also be able to find this information on the district's website. We presented to the community and the board a plan of how, when it's safe to do so, we would transition our students back to a form of in-person learning, a hybrid plan. And we heard very much from the community and also from the board that there were areas of the plan that we definitely were asked to address. So the purpose or the objective of the panel rather is several fold. One is to ensure that we had additional parent and community input, and that input is reflected in the final plan. That we would identify those areas that either needed further clarification or needed improvement. So we're really trying to build on the plan to make it such that the community would be able to embrace it. Based on that, we want the panel to make recommendations to myself, and we will be presenting those recommendations to the board sometime in December. And finally, we wanted to, with the panel's help, make sure that we are highlighting in a transparent way the challenges and also the trade-offs as we are refining the design of the hybrid learning plan. So next slide, Michael, please. So the panel has been meeting. We've had 2 meetings to date. The first meeting occurred on October 29th, and our last meeting occurred on November the 5th. We have a meeting coming up this week on Friday, but the 2 meetings that we've had to date, there was a high level of engagement, suggestions, questions, and really active input. I'm really so pleased. Prior to our first meeting, we organized the group around 6 work groups, and we allowed the panel members to select, based on their interests and also their expertise, which of the 6 areas that they wanted to work with. So once again, similar to our transition team, we have a social emotional learning and support work group. We decided to break up the considerations and learning modals into 2 areas, one for elementary, our K-5, and one for our 2 middle schools. Along with that, we have a work group around family support that is inclusive of childcare, providing meals and transportation. We have a safety, medical, and health work group. And finally, we have a community and parent engagement work group. Next slide, please, Michael. So at the first meeting, those work groups met in small groups, and they really brought to mind the issues and concerns that they had around the current plan. They also brought to light areas that needed further clarification. And based on that first meeting, there were several actions that were planned. One was, and Amanda Siegfried, I will allow to kind of step in here and provide a little bit more information about this first item, was to draft and design a parent survey or a family survey rather, to launch from November the 7th through November the 12th. And that basically was designed with the input from the panel members. So Amanda, did you want to share a little bit more about the survey itself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Amanda Siegfried. I'm the Director of Communications for District 97. The survey went out Saturday morning, so that was November 7th, and it will be open through this coming Thursday at 9 a.m. So I actually sent a reminder to parents this evening and a robocall. So hopefully we're reaching people. Really pleased with the response so far. I think we had about 32 or 3,300 responses last I checked. So we are looking for 1 survey response per student, which will really allow us to disaggregate the data based on grade level, school, demographics, student needs. So we're excited to dig into that data later this week. The big question for us, or really what we were kind of looking to get out of this survey, was just sort of an estimate of how many students we can expect to be coming back on site in a hybrid model. That really impacts a lot of our planning. So I know the high school was looking for sort of the same type of information with their surveys. So I think we're going to get some really good data out of this, and I'm really appreciative for all the parents that have taken the time to complete it. And I would encourage everyone to, reach out to their neighbors, their friends, and just encourage them. It takes, I think the average time I saw in SurveyMonkey, it says it's taking people anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. So it's pretty quick. I think that's really it. We're planning to share the results with the board and the panel on Friday. So I'll make that report public once we're able to discuss it in that space.
Thank you, Amanda. The other thing that came out of our panel discussion was a list of questions and also a request to see like what other districts were doing. So we did share out the list of questions along with our responses with this last communication that went to the community this past, was that Friday, Amanda? And it's also contained on our district's website. And then one of the members of our transition team, Michael Ahrensdorf, had reached out to a variety of districts, and we were able to share with the panel what other districts were doing. And Michael, I don't know if you wanted to highlight that at all.
Yeah, we've got, I'm not exactly the number, but it's between probably about 15 to 20 districts that we've connected with and learned different information around their models, and then started asking specific questions around this. What are they doing for lunch? What does their schedule look like? Their enrollments, their demographics, all of those things. How are they managing students at home versus on site? In addition to like kind of more reach out and talking individually with them. Also as part of COSIN and IETL, it's a local group that I'm a part of, our district's a part of as a membership with, sent out a survey to all of those districts to grab even more information from them we sent it last week actually, to see where they at now and what has been happening in their plans and their working to do that. And at this point, we have about 19 districts out of the 100 in just a short period of time that are responded. So that'll continue to come in and be shared out with this group to be able to help inform and learn from others and what's working for them.
Thank you, Michael. And once again, we are really trying to make the conversations transparent for the board and the community. So the meetings are being recorded when we are meeting in as a large group. And also the summary of our notes are being shared out with the Oak Park community. And I, again, just really want to thank Amanda for the quick turnaround time on that. This planning has been for our district underway since last May. But I think, you know, what we're really trying to do with the advisory panel is make the conversations about the challenges and the trade-offs for each of these areas transparent. So please, you know, when you receive those emails from the district, please, you know, read through those. Perhaps if you don't want to read them, perhaps listen to the recordings so that you are aware of all of the heart planning that they are doing. Next slide, please. Other activities to date, and this really kind of leads into some of the share outs that I will provide. And again, the purpose of the advisory panel is not to like make decisions per se. You know, as I share some of their ideals out with the board and the community, I just want to let you know that these are areas that have been identified for the district to potentially explore as we are looking at like what are the ways that we can improve or clarify what was in that original hybrid plan that was presented in October. So there are 4 consensus themes in general. One was addressing the issue of students not necessarily having to change classes or teachers, addressing the proposed schedule that was outlined in that current plan, addressing the lunch so that perhaps the instructional day for when students are in person could be lengthened. And then there was somewhat of consensus around considering when students are in person, perhaps that is meeting the need of enrichment or socialization opportunities. So next slide. At our last meeting, we had the group not go into their work groups, but rather we randomly assigned them to smaller groups so that each of those small heterogeneous groups could talk about all 4 of the themes. And we provided a protocol for them to follow. And what we've done since our meeting on November 5th is we have taken a look at all of their notes, and we've consolidated their notes, and we have identified several examples of ideals that the panel has asked the district to consider. And again, these are just ideals that we are exploring. There's nothing definite has been decided upon. But in terms of the first theme, definitely heard a lot from the community, either public comments or emails, let's talk messages, and it was also raised as an issue to address by the panel. Was overcoming the obstacle or challenge of students having to change teachers potentially. And there were 3 themes. And again, this presentation is going to be shared with the community. You will be able to click on the link that says examples of ideals explored to see more details behind what I'm sharing with you this evening. But the 3 ideals that rose up from all, I think we had 10 small groups November 5th that had conversations about this theme, were live streaming. And Michael, do you want to just kind of give folk, like when we say live streaming, what that is? And, is the district prepared to do live streaming?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So live streaming, I know that word people can look at that differently. We would just look at that as using Zoom, so continuing in a similar fashion. So some students would be on site and some students would be joining the Zoom remotely, and teachers would be able to, again, through the support of the board, the district, and previous technology plans. Obviously, our staff they have computers, they have iPads, and then in each of our classrooms, we have short throw projectors that also have speakers in each of those classrooms. So the teachers would mirror their device to the Apple TV and the projector to be able to display the same content that would be done through the Zoom for the kids, either on site or remote. And then it would have that amplification of any students that are participating and talking from the speakers in the classroom to the rest of the class. Working through and again, as part of that survey and collaborating with these districts around us of what have they done and what solutions have they put in. And the big kind of thing that we're working with is how do we get the amplification of the students on site to the students that are remote. Teacher would be by their computer, by their device, so that's a little easier for them to hear them, but it's the whole class of all of that. So we've got a couple solutions that we're going to start. We've already been doing some testing, but we're going to really dive into proof of concept to ensure we have the right solution to do that. Again, support of the board, the district, and our previous tech plans has put us in place to do this and to do it in a cost-effective way to meet the needs of our staff and our students. So again, the training and what our teachers have been doing now with Zoom continues and will continue to be there if that solution and that is the direction that we move forward in.
Right. And I just also want to reiterate that live streaming was discussed and talked about with the transition team. There are trade-offs and challenges to that. But again, it was one of the ideals to explore to help overcome the challenge of having to change teachers potentially. Another ideal that came up was starting the new year. And I believe Renee Slade is one of the panelists tonight. That came from her group. So I will invite her if she's here to talk about it. If not, I can do my best. It basically.
I am here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Hi.
So I'll stop.
It wasn't my own idea, but it did come from my group. It's basically just psychologically, you have this opportunity that the teacher can finish up the year, like wrap things up, and everybody can emotionally kind of end the year and say their goodbyes to each other. And then in January, you get a new teacher based on your your preferences of remote versus in person. And you might not get a new teacher, there's just a chance that you will, but you have a psychological preparation for it. It's not just a bunch of chaos.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And again, with each of these options, trade-offs and challenges, and then the final that came up was for teachers to plan works for both of the students that are remote only and the students that are hybrid, and they would be working with one group at a time. And the students that they're not working with, they would design activities and works for students to work by themselves. So those were the three. For the second theme, there was conversations around the proposed schedule in the current plan had students alternating Fridays as the day that they would either be in person or remote day. So there are a variety of suggestions around looking at the schedule from grouping the days of students, maybe students be in person for 3 days and then off remote only for 10 days, to changing the alternate day from Friday to Wednesday, to having students attending Monday through Friday, but only half-day sessions, either in the morning or in the afternoon, to like a suggestion of perhaps the middle school and the elementary school could have different schedules. And there were several proposals, honestly, that were that came up out of the 10 groups that met on November 5th. That were actually in the original plan that was presented October 13th. So I thought that was interesting. Theme 3, next slide, Michael. Was really figuring out like the lunch situation. If you could figure out the lunch situation, then perhaps that the in-person days could be lengthened or made into a full day. And the ideals to explore around 3 areas: student supervision of students while they are at recess or lunch, because the teachers would be at their own lunch or their planning period. Like exploring the cost of additional staff members to supervise students during that time. Addressing the issues of space. We know that unless students are eating in their classrooms, that you are only able to have so many students in one spot at a time. And then addressing lots of safety concerns that were brought up, just a whole host of concerns. So those are some further exploration that we would be doing in our upcoming meetings. And then theme number 4 was the ideal around perhaps providing the in-person experiences more so for socialization opportunities for students or enrichment opportunities, reducing perhaps the need for students to be on site as frequently. And the ideals to explore, of the 10 groups, I would say the majority of the groups didn't necessarily think that this was something for the district to do per se. Perhaps that could be something that we would partner with other organizations. But for the groups that did think that this was something to explore further, they did offer some suggestions or rationale as to why it was a need. Things like, the mental health concerns, the socialization, trying to get students to do things that are away from their device. But for the groups that didn't necessarily think that it was something for District 97 to use that in-person time for socialization, they offered some suggestions on how to address the socialization needs for our students. So those were some examples for the 4 themes. In terms of next steps, next slide, Michael. Like I said, the next meeting is Friday, November the 5th. We do have a couple of our parents in district. One is a superintendent. The other one, who was a former principal, is assistant superintendent in a neighboring well, maybe not as neighboring, but in districts that have had students back in person for some time. So they have been invited to our next meeting to share like what has gone well and what are some challenges that they have encountered around certain things like lunch, social distancing, the whole capacity issues, staffing, what have they done, like if they've had anyone that has tested positive and how did they handle that. So that is really something that we heard from the panel, that they wanted to not just look at the benchmark spreadsheet that we provided them, but they wanted to hear from other people as well. And we have also plans to use the notes from our last meeting that have been put together in those themes to figure out how we might operationalize some of the possibilities or suggestions. So that probably won't come on Friday, but that next step would probably happen at our November the 19th meeting. And I potentially may invite our original transition team members to that meeting to work with our work groups because of their expertise of knowing, how it would actually look in district to implement some of those things. And then finally, to make sure that we are engaging all of our families, not just those who are on the panel, as well as our staff and student voice. We're looking at the possibility of using a tool called Thought Exchange. Our high school is currently using that tool for this engagement process. So we will be simulating the engagement process at our next superintendent advisory panel meeting on Friday to see how we might use the tool as a mechanism to get more input from the community around the ideals that we are exploring to address those 4 themes. Next slide, please. And I think that concludes. I will just again reiterate that this is a moment for every school district in our world to chart our own course, the things that we would typically do in terms of benchmarking ourselves against best practices. I again want to reiterate and thank our transition team that they used frameworks from organizations like Hanover Research, AASA, COSIN, I think Michael, talked to, and many, many others to create the plans that we currently have for either remote learning or our hybrid plan. What we are doing right now is we're taking the current hybrid plan and listening to your feedback, and we are working with the current plan to address the areas of concerns. And also making more transparent what the trade-offs and the challenges are for addressing those areas of concerns. So I will stop talking now. And again, we have some other members from the panel who may be panelists. I know Mary Pat is on the line. One of our nurses, Nurse Hillary, is on the line. If Sylvia, is there anything that I missed, that you would like to hear addressed? So, hearing nothing, are there any questions from the board?
I had a couple quick questions, and thanks for this presentation, and thanks to all the panel folks that joined us tonight and for all your work on this, much appreciated. One question I had around the live streaming is if you guys have had a chance to, or if you plan to talk to teachers that have used live streaming and just how that teaching experience has gone for them. And I can imagine it at least takes some adjustment in terms of teaching the students both in the classroom and through Zoom at the same time. So I'd love to hear now or down the road if you guys have heard anything about how that experience goes.
And Ebony, do you want to give a little insight as well of the answer to that question as to like what some of the trade-offs and challenges that the learning models thought about when we first were thinking about live streaming?
Sure. So there are definitely challenges inherent in trying to address two groups of students at once. So there would have to definitely be some intentional planning around making sure that both groups of students are remote learners, as well as students who are on site have a similar enriched experience. But based on kind of experiences with other schools, that has proven difficult, just in terms of just logistically. So the only other alternative could be like everyone Zooms at the same time, but then that changes the experience too. So we looked at a couple different models to try and figure out how to make sure that we maintain those student-teacher pairings. But kind of as Dr. Kelley said, there are trade-offs in terms of the quality of instruction that will likely happen simply because it's a new practice and one that teachers will have to go in with little kind of experience in.
And can I also say, and I'm just going to say this, I think, you know, as a district and as a community, we also have to just put out there the trade-off of who's going to experience the instruction in a different way. I don't know what our data looks like. If I were a betting person, I'm going to imagine that the families that will elect, you know, and I'm just going to say it, the families that will elect like a remote only experience would probably look like me. You know, and again, I don't have this data concretely, but I think the way that we are experiencing COVID is in the way that we see how COVID is impacting certain communities. I believe will impact the decisions that parents are making. So one of the trade-offs with the live streaming is it's difficult, I think, for teachers to be able to, for both groups of students, deliver, you know, it well. And I'm not saying that our teachers are not able to do that, but I do think that that's a trade-off that we have to consider.
And I will add that that was absolutely one of the things that we considered because we don't want to further exacerbate our equity issue or challenge. So we know that students who are likely to be marginalized or we just need to make sure that we're taking special care. And because students of color and families of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID, this was definitely something that was top of mind as we were planning and thinking about what those trade-offs might be.
But again, our planning for the transition back, we definitely heard from the community the concern around, you know, not wanting to have a different teacher or classes. So, you know, one of the other suggestions that came up, as Renee talked about, was, you know, perhaps having an artificial like end of the year and then, you know, a start of a new year. So that's another ideal for the group to explore.
I think, I mean, it'll be interesting because I think the survey will help us understand which families are indicating what preferences. And also, I think we're going to find out whether parents would prefer keeping the teacher that they have regardless of model, which may give us some additional ability to minimize the degree to which folks might need to change teachers and give people an opportunity to say, I'm willing to change teachers if it means that I get the model I prefer. The other question I had is more just a clarification. The bullet that said plan year based on student experience, I don't think I followed exactly what that means. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. Michael, you may have to go back to just jog my memory. plan the work.
Sorry, I couldn't read my own handwriting. Plan work based on students' preference.
Yeah, so I will
Like
definitely
60% of the words right there.
I definitely will do my best. So if I'm the classroom teacher and I've kept my class, there are some of my students that are remote only. So there will be a part of my day where I'm working with those students. And then the students that are in person are like doing work, independently. They're doing independent work. So it will require the teacher to plan for both groups of students, and they would be with one group of students providing direct instruction, either in person, and therefore the remote students will be working asynchronously, or if they're working remotely with the remote students, then the students that are in person would be doing some type of independent seek work while they're in person. Does that make sense?
It does. One follow-up question is I think we've had similar discussions around using specials in a similar way, where the primary teacher, is that also sort of a factor in this possible approach, or is it this like a different thing?
So I'm going to let Ebony or Michael answer that question because I believe a lot of these suggestions that we're exploring are more so around, I don't want to call them academic or core classes, but the enrichment like classes. So do you know, like, have there been any conversations yet, Ebony, with the current plan on the how, like the art and, music, things of that nature would be happening?
I'd probably have to defer to Michael. He's probably a little bit closer to it than I am. Sorry, Michael.
Okay, so yeah, the current hybrid plan that and a lot of the models we're talking when they were shortened to the half a day on site were taking place when those students go home and go remote, that they would have their electives or their specials during those time, with then some of that time built in for that teacher to then connect with students that are remote. So yes, that would be and has been a lot of the conversation and considerations of what that looks like. Obviously, there are trickle down things of what does that look like schedule and how does that work and the operational piece of that. Obviously, we've had a lot of questions and we had teachers and in the special areas and elective areas that were part of that transition plan. And I mean, there are numerous schedules that we put in place that might work with that. And again, once we have some of these final details to operationalize, we'll put those in place. So
I
yeah.
think this suggestion though from the group is more so around, like if I'm a fifth grade teacher, that it's more so like that fifth grade teacher would have like two groups of, or the homeroom teacher, not as much around the elective area teachers. Did they answer both of your questions, Gavin?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. And again, the materials will be provided to Amanda so that we can share out with the community. And we look forward to our next Superintendent Advisory Panel meeting on Friday. Thank you very much, everyone who did come to tonight's conversation with the board.